2, 3, 4. Let me tell you about PuckPedia, stats, contracts, and caps. It's all there for you. One-stop shop for your hockey information. It's a hockey sensation. So log on, log on, log on. If you give a puck, go to PuckPedia.com.
PuckPedia Hockey Show, Episode 3. We are live, NHL Free Agency special. I am your host, Keith Kavanaugh, alongside Hart Levine, I think the undisputed godfather of NHL Free Agency today. Hart, how you doing?
I'm pretty worn out. It's been a long few days and a long day so far, and there's still a lot more to come. I mean, we still have a lot of free agents to sign, big names, and even a lot of two-way deals. So it's a fun day, but it's also a grind.
Hart's been on the horn nonstop. I've seen PuckPedia referenced about 1,000 different ways on different live streams, Twitter. Like, people are just playing with Puck GM, trying to see how these players are going to fit onto their roster. It's been a good day for PuckPedia, and honestly, we didn't think that it would be a good day in NHL Free Agency just based off of the available talent there. But I think all things considered, we got a pretty good day. If we mentioned earlier, Hart was on the Daily Faceoff stream. If we can get that picture up here, Hart was there for about 4 hours today in the top
Just
corner.
Stuck in the corner.
The cap cam with Hart Levine. He was texting, and then they would slowly pull him in, have him talk through some contracts, bring him back out. But you had eyes on him for 4 straight hours. How was the cap cam, Hart?
Yeah, it was honestly, like, I kind of forgot it was there when I was just working away trying to get the signings and posts and everything. And then they'd kind of randomly throw to me, and I'd just like, whoa, okay, time to talk now. So it was definitely a new experience. But it was good to be on with those guys, and looking forward to doing some more things like that and talking to you as well. But it was a lot. I mean, it's great to talk hockey anytime, but trying to talk while also multitask with texting and following on Twitter and getting information. It's a lot. Thank goodness I have a really great team now. The guys on the PuckPedia team worked super hard and were pounding away, especially when I wasn't that available. So yeah, it's definitely a team effort.
Yeah, it must be hard when there's so many contracts flying all at once, and you guys aren't necessarily a big team, but I think in terms of you guys being able to get all this information, enter the contracts in, and then entering it correctly, because accuracy is clearly the most important thing here in terms of all these nuances with these deals, signing bonus, salaries, because all that information is important to understand then the buyouts and how the cap hits and everything like that. So I think you guys did a great job today. Nailed it. We had, I think I just checked the website 2 minutes ago. We were at 107 contracts signed today for a grand total of $654 million.
Wow. And I think last year finished at like 1.2 billion and like 158 or so contracts. So we're almost there. And I would not be surprised, at least if we get to the number of contracts pretty close to that. Because again, there's still a lot of contracts that will come in today. There's still some that I have on my list to try and confirm that we haven't entered yet. So it's, even though that maybe didn't have some of the biggest names, it's still a lot of volume. There's a lot of players that need to get signed every year. And for them, it's their big day. And for us, every contract is super important, to your point, that it's really accurate. So I'm just like harassing my contacts for the minors amounts on the second year of a deal. Cause it's super important that it's all accurate.
Yeah, some of those deals you see and you're like, oh, it's just a $775K two-way deal. But all that stuff ends up being important in the grand scheme of things, because calculating the cap hits daily during the season, a lot of that information is important to make sure that the cap hits are accurate. A couple questions I want to ask you before we dive into today's free agency that I think our audience would want to hear just your perspective on these couple things. So a couple questions I saw floating around on Twitter today, just general contract questions. So the first one is, can a player sign a 1-year contract today and then immediately get extended tomorrow for a couple more years? Basically, the thinking is the teams are in a cap crunch right now, but they'll have more cap space next year with the cap going up and maybe some contracts coming off the books. So like a guy like Jake Allen, who signed for a pretty low AAV, could the Devils have signed him for a 1-year, $1 million deal this year and then immediately extended him for like 2 years times $3 million?
No, if you sign a 1-year deal, you're not eligible for an extension until January 1st. So you can sign an extension 1 year out if you're on a multi-year deal. Which is why we saw like Fairbury and Thatcher Demko, Conor Garland sign long extensions. They could sign today because they're going to the last year of a multi-year deal. But when you're on a 1-year deal, you can't sign an extension until January. So anyone that signed a 1-year deal today, they have to wait till January 1st.
Got it. So in theory, you can kind of have a non-official agreement, but if you signed a 1-year deal on July 1st, you could then get extended on January 1st.
Yeah, I mean they use that the cap circumvention clause in the CBA for that kind of thing. So you can't like pre-agree to a future deal. That would be illegal. But you could sign this deal and then on January 1st sign a new deal, and that would be okay as long as it's not like again pre-arranged or pre-agreed to. To similar like people forget you can actually buy out a player and then go ahead and sign them again right away. But again, the rule is about against that cap circumvention clause. You can't have planned that. You can't say to them, "I'm going to buy you out and then I'll sign you." You can buy them out, and then when the market opens, hey, do you want to negotiate a contract and sign them? And that's allowed. That's happened with a couple of guys in the past. So yeah, they kind of use that cap circumvention clause to just make sure that no one's pre-agreeing to some of these deals.
That makes sense. I'm sure there are some pre-agreements, but as long as they keep them hush hush, I think I saw a text that was like, "What time do you think the GMs send out the group text to say what time we could start announcing these signings?" And we heard that 12:07 might have been the number today on so to avoid tampering.
Oh yeah, it did seem
So
like I'll say this year. It did seem like there was less that were outright at the bell. I mean, I know personally, yeah, it was. It didn't seem like there as many deals were done. I mean, there's certainly a few. It seemed like we knew where the players were going, but the terms and everything weren't all worked out yet until sometimes shortly after. But definitely in past years, it was like 12:01, and there's like a whole list of signings. And today it took a little bit longer, a few minutes, anyways.
it did, but then we kind of got right into the mix. So let's go into the deals right now. So we're going to start with a deal that was agreed to yesterday, but officially registered today. The Mitch Marner to Vegas. We talked about it on the PuckPedia Hockey Show episode 2. Marner did a sign and trade with the Leafs where he technically signed his 8-year, $12 million AAV contract with Toronto and then was subsequently traded to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Nicholas Waugh in a 1-for-1 deal, the Bob McKenzie special. Shout out to Bob McKenzie, who's officially fully retired from TSN. I think he said after 49 years. So what a career for him. But the 1-for-1 is his trademark with the Taylor Hall, Adam Larson deal. So that was the Mitch Marner trade. Vegas right now has negative cap space, which is fine in the offseason. You're allowed to go 10% over the cap ceiling, which is $9.55 million for Vegas. Right now, they're $7.6 million over the cap. I want to hear your thoughts on this deal and then explain to me why Vegas will want to get to about minus $8.8 million on their cap hit when the season kind of starts.
Yeah, so this one was interesting too, with just the timing. So Marner could only sign an 8-year deal with Toronto, and it had to be yesterday by midnight. That's different than we saw. We can get to the Keandre Miller sign and trade. He could sign his 8-year deal today because he was a restricted free agent, but because Marner was an unrestricted free agent, to get 8 years, it had to be signed by midnight yesterday with the Leafs. So he makes that signs that contract, and it also interesting just to kind of cap juggling. Toronto actually had not signed Matthew Knies officially, even though it had all been reported. They didn't even register the contract. They had to give him a qualifying offer yesterday to officially keep his rights. So then once, so Marner was signed, and I got a lot of questions yesterday. Why are you showing Marner on the Leafs with this contract? And I'm like, well, he did sign the contract, and he is on the Leafs right now. I mean that. Yep. For a few hours, he was a Leaf with a contract of $12 million coming up here. But yeah, after midnight tonight, when sort of the day flips over and the season flips over for CBA purposes, then he was traded to Vegas. You know, it makes a lot of sense when you think of it. Like, they signed him for $12 million. They moved out Nick Waugh for $3 million. That's a net of $9 million. And then they also announced Pietrangelo at 8.8 is on LTIR for the rest of his contract, basically. So it was kind of an in and out. You know, we have on the board here the other trade that they made with Nashville to also just clear a little bit of space. So yeah, with Vegas now, we show them over the cap. We show them $7.6 million over the cap with 22 active players on the roster. When you have a player on LTIR, you have to set what's called your LTIR pool. And a reminder, when you use LTIR, it allows you to exceed the cap. So it's not like the LTIR. It's not like the cap, it just comes off you because you're an LTIR. It allows you to exceed the cap by up to that player's cap it. And the way to get that LTIR to be right up to that player's cap hit is by setting the pool in a real optimal way. So there's two ways to set it when you start the season. One is you're just under the cap by as little as possible, and then you place the player on LTIR the next day. The second way is you're over the cap by as close as possible as that player's cap hit. So let's say they start with Pietrangelo on LTIR and they were only $7 million over the cap. Then that's how much they can stay over the cap the rest of the season. So they've kind of lost that remaining difference. So the way that teams, especially savvy teams like Tampa and Vegas do it is they make a bunch of roster moves and do some creative signings so they can get right to the right number, or very close to it, so they can capture almost the entire amount of LTIR. So for Vegas now, we show them 7.6 million over the cap. And I would expect when they submit their opening roster in the fall, assuming no one else is injured, they finish like almost exactly 8.8 over, which is Pietrangelo's cap at maybe a few dollars less. So that could mean, they have some players called up that we don't have, or maybe they go sign another free agent or work the combination to get right to that number. But that's what I'd expect them to do.
Yeah, and I think all that stuff is super interesting, right? Because a lot of the casual fans wouldn't understand all these cap mechanisms that kind of go behind the scenes, and really understanding why Vegas would want to add more money if they're already $7.6 million over the cap. So I think it's good to get that insight that they actually will want to be about $8.8 million or as close to that number as possible, so that they can maximize the amount of money that they're able to spend during the season. I think that's a good move for Vegas too. Like, Mitch Marner's going to slot in. He's going to either play with Jack Eichel centering that line. He's a dynamic playmaker. He's going to do a lot of things for them. He plays all situations, power play, penalty kill. So we love this move for Vegas. We'll see how it plays out in the regular season. But that was a move that happened last night, and that kind of kickstarted today's free agency. And I think the first team that kind of made some waves in the morning were the Vancouver Canucks. The first deal that was announced by them was Thatcher Demko. He signed an extension, so he actually has one more year on his deal. So his extension won't kick in until the 26-27 season, but he signed for 3 years at $8.5 million average annual value. There's only 4 other goalies in the NHL that currently have a higher AAV than Thatcher Demko will when this contract takes place. They also re-signed a couple of their forwards. One that was expected to happen, that was announced, and that's Conor Garland for a 6-year, $6 million AAV contract. And then Brock Boeser, which is very surprising to a lot of people. He signed for 7 years at $7.25 million AAV. I don't think the contract was what surprised people. I think it was the fact that it kind of seemed like these player and team were going to go their separate ways. And I'm curious if you have any insight on how they kind of pulled a 180 and Brock Boeser re-signed there, and also what your thoughts are on the Garland and Demko deals. And then obviously they acquired Evander Kane a few days ago.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there that they've been busy. With Kane, I would say it's, of all the teams in the league, that you'd think maybe he would have a tougher time fitting into the locker room, or being a positive influence in the locker room. Considering all the reporting last year about what that locker room was like, that was a big surprise. Not a surprise because it's his home, and not a surprise because he still has, you saw in the playoffs, like, he still has value, and he's, good on the forecheck. He seems somewhat healthy right now. So, I certainly expected that Edmonton would get something for him. I didn't think he had negative value, but just that it was Vancouver, considering everything in the room, that was a surprise to me. On the extensions, I think Garland's perfectly fair, maybe even a bit team friendly. He's really can really buzz out there and create a lot of chances. Maybe that small stature as he gets older, maybe that won't age as well, but it's 6 years and it's not like 8 years. So, you can kind of understand where the size got there. Demko to me was a surprise, a kind of a jaw dropper when I saw the number. Look, he's a Vezina finalist. When he's on his game, like, of course he's worth that. You look at most of these other goalies signed for, 8.25, that are top end goalies that have been in the Vezina conversation, and they sign for longer term deals. So you get them that basically the same number. Maybe even you might consider a little bit lower number, just because the cap is higher next season versus last season when those deals were signed. But you obviously have to keep in mind the injury. And since his injury issues really started a year ago, he has not shown that he is able to play even close to that level or standard. There were some glimpses, but you look at his stat line from last year, I mean, that does not scream $8.5 million goalie, right? So this is a real bet that he is going to rebound to his form, because they're paying like basically full price for his previous form. The only discount they got, I would say, is on the term. They didn't have to make the 7 or 8 year commitment, but they're still paying pretty close to that full cap hit. So it'll be really interesting to see. We've heard too that, like, with that injury, it's not something that you're going to recover from. It's more he has to get used to playing with it, which seems that's a big gamble. So that'll be really interesting to see how it works out.
Yeah, I think the interesting part too is that they also have Kevin Lankinen that just signed to a pretty long ticket. I want to say
Hey,
5 years, maybe around 4 million or vice versa. And then Shelov's in the
she
minor
loves,
leagues
yeah.
he's now subject to waivers if he gets sent up and down. So maybe they try to move. Probably Shelov's would be the easier one to move. Of Lankinen, I'm sure Lankinen has some sort of trade protection in his deal. But to me, I thought that was interesting. It seemed like Demko was kind of going to be on the move to a goaltender needy team, especially when you look at how thin the goaltender market was in free agency this year.
Yeah, and you're right that Lankinen's at a 4.5, and he's got a full no move for the next 2 years too. So don't think he's going anywhere, and you can't trade him because he played quite well for you, and he looked like a legitimate starter. Yeah, Shelovs will be interesting. He had that really good playoffs for them, the last time they were playoffs a year ago, and then was really poor in the regular season, and then obviously had a great AHL run. So will they carry 3 goalies? Will they try to sneak Shelovs through waivers? I'd be surprised if he makes it through. When you look at what's out there on the goalie market, teams that probably want an upgrade in net, and you look at what guys that really haven't had great NHL stats recently are signing for, recently and today, I would think that a team would jump all over Shelovs out of training camp. But who knows? Maybe Demko will be hurt, and then they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens, but Vancouver was definitely a team that caught my eye. Like we mentioned, they only have 556K in cap space right now, so we'll see if they try to get some money off of their roster, or if this is kind of the team that they're going to enter the season with. Another team that really caught our eye, Hart, was the New York Rangers today. So the Rangers, I think their first signing was a signing that a lot of people online had expected to happen, and that was Vladislav Gavrikov from the Los Angeles Kings. Signed a pretty reasonable deal with the New York Rangers, 7 years, $7 million average annual value. A lot of people thought that number would be a lot higher given the thin defense market, and especially with Ekblad now off the market as well. There's really not much right-hand defenseman on that market, even though Gavrikov plays the left side. But then also they re-upped Will Cuylle, which is also really good to see for the Rangers, on a deal that some people might have wanted more term, but they got 2 years at $3.9 million average annual value. He will still be a restricted free agent at the expiry of this deal, so that's good to see. But the real eye catcher, the eye opener here, was the K'Andre Miller deal. So the Rangers executed a sign and trade with division rival Carolina Hurricanes, which I think was another surprising factor. It was not the fact that they traded him, but who they traded him to. So they executed a sign and trade. K'Andre Miller signed an 8-year, $7.5 million average annual value deal, which seemed like a little bit of a shock factor, I think, at first, with not only the term, but the amount of average annual value. But then the Rangers also got a really good return on this deal. They got a 2026 first-round pick, top 10 protected. It said the better of Carolina or Dallas's pick, so that's interesting to see. Usually the team that gets the first-round pick, it's usually the worst. So the Rangers are getting the better of that pick, a 2026 second-round pick, and then defenseman Scott Morrow, who has 1 year left at $917K and is an RFA at the end of this season. Hart, what did you think about this? Did this kind of come out of nowhere, surprise you? And did it surprise you not only the signing and the amount K'Andre signed for, but then who they traded him to and what that return was on the trade?
I'm not surprised at all that K'Andre Miller got traded. I mean, we'd heard a lot of trade buzz and that they weren't close on a contract. I guess I just assumed that when he signed wherever that was, or if he re-signed in New York, it would just be a short bridge deal, not too much money. So to see that he signed for 8 years and for that much money, $7.5 million, I was quite surprised, blown away. Yeah, that's a big bet. I just pulling up here. So defensemen that signed on a cap hit less than K'Andre Miller in the last couple of days: Gavrikov, Romanov, Ekblad, Fairbury, Dante Fabro. Tell me where, is K'Andre Miller definitely better than all those players? I don't know, right? Like, he has shown flashes, but I think his last season left a lot to be desired, and he hasn't shown the consistency, right? So that blew me away. And also the acquisition, a decent first, and a second, and a good player, young D-Man and Scott Morrow, yeah, that's a lot to also give up. So I think that Carolina must really, really like him. Obviously, we know they're very high into analytics, and they must have a really good read on this player. And I think the Rangers, that they feel pretty good that they, they weren't ready to commit to that kind of number, and they were able to turn it into something pretty good, and basically, replace them on their D with Gavrikov. Again, who would you rather have, Gavrikov at 7 or Keandre Miller at 7.5? I know there's a 4-year difference. But I know the Rangers missed the playoffs, but I do think they're trying to take a step forward. I think Gavrikov, at least for now, is probably gives you a better chance to win, especially since they've been lacking more of the defender part of a defenseman.
Yeah, and if the Hurricanes wanted to offer sheet Keandre Miller, they probably wouldn't be able to do it at that number because offer sheets, like we've mentioned in the past, are calculated on 5-year terms. So with Keandre Miller getting $60 million on this contract, it would be in the $12 million compensation threshold. So that would be a hefty price for the Hurricanes to pay there. And I did want to talk through Gavrikov's contract real quick too. So if you take a look at the structure of this deal. So it's very heavy in signing bonus. So the first 2 years, $1 million, then $8 million in signing bonus. And then the signing bonus kind of goes down throughout the duration of this deal. First 5 years, no move clause, 20 team in year 6, and then 15 team in year 7. I wanted to get your take on this because I heard you on the Daily Faceoff, and I think it would be good for our audience to understand that. You said that this contract is pretty buyout proof. So I want to talk through why exactly that this contract is buyout proof.
Yeah, so signing bonuses cannot be bought out. So anytime that there's a signing bonus in a contract in a specific year, if you try and buy it out at that point or earlier, the cap hit's going to be quite high because you're basically only buying out the salary, and then the signing bonus is still paid and still added to the buyout cap hit. So, I would say those first 5 years, you cannot buy that out because you'd get very little relief. In year 6, if you were to buy it out, I can pull that up right here. Instead of the $7 million cap hit, you'd have a cap hit of $5 million for 1 year, $3 million for the next year, and then 1.5 for 2 years. So, maybe a little bit of savings, but not that much. So it's really only in that last year when you no longer have any signing bonus that you really could see a benefit of buying it out. Again, teams aren't signing contracts, so they think they're going to buy them out, but clearly that's something that agents think about, especially with older players when they're structuring a deal. It's how do I make sure that my player actually receives everything in this deal that we negotiated? One way is to negotiate into the contract the signing bonuses and basically guaranteeing that money. So yeah, when you see a structure like this is basically the structure that the agent would want. The only thing that the agent would have wanted more was just a bonus in year 7. But if you think that Gavrikov, his market value was around $7 million, he got his market value on the dollars, and he got he got all the money, and he basically got all the clauses and structure too.
Yeah. Which is great to understand that side of things, because I think when people see all the salary and the signing bonus, they don't necessarily understand exactly why the contracts are structured that way. So I think it's good to get that insight and understand that when agents are trying to negotiate for the more signing bonus, they're trying to make sure their players get the money, but also that they aren't kind of bought out and they're getting what they agreed upon in these deals. Because 4 or 5 years down the road, if these players break down, the teams are going to try to do everything they can to move them off of their roster, and the agent's job is to kind of make sure that doesn't happen. And then looking on the Carolina side of things too, they still have a good amount of cap space. I was looking, they have about $19 million in cap space still. A lot of their roster is already put together. Their core is already signed for a long period of time. So Carolina is still rumored to be the Nikolai Ehlers destination. Yeah. We'll see if he signs tomorrow or the next day. It sounds like he wanted to take the day to kind of sift through some offers and see what the situation is. Because if you look at someone like Mikael Granlund, he did the opposite. Ehlers is, he's willing to take less maybe for a contender. Granlund went the opposite route and maximized his amount of money. He got $7 million average annual value for 3 seasons with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, the Anaheim Ducks are still a team that need to hit the cap floor. So for them, that deal is really not an issue at all for them. They're at about $66 million. The cap floor is at $70.6 million this season. They still have a couple RFAs to sign, but it's interesting to see a lot of teams can overpay if they want to because of the cap space.
Yeah, I mean, teams, especially if you have cap space, you can overpay if the term's not too long, right? You mentioned a team like Anaheim, they do have a lot of good young players. They're going to have to pay their players eventually. So if you're going to overpay, do it on a short-term deal. So Garland signed a 3-year deal. Maybe by that 3rd year, he's not living up to it, and they need to create some room, but they have so much room right now. But to your point on Carolina, yeah, they have a lot of space. I think they were already very heavy into the Ehlers mix. I think they were even looking at doing a sign and trade with Winnipeg prior to yesterday. So I think that they're definitely looking in that direction. You look at their D too, like they have now 7D. They signed Mike Riley as well for 1.1, with Nikishin kind of being in that 6-7 mix. But it doesn't seem like that strong of a D. I mean, you think back to what their D used to look like when they were really good. So yeah, I mean, I still think that Carolina has some moves in their plate. That Carolina seems like every summer they let their free agents go, they wait a little bit, and then they make some trades with teams that need to clear cap space and just basically give up nothing to bring that player in. That's how they got Burns. That's how they got Pacioretty. This year, though, I think what's different is there's just a lot of teams that do have cap space, and there's a lot of teams that are trying to get better. They're not necessarily trying to offload players. So we'll have to see, will that strategy work again this summer, or are they going to be left with a lot of cap space and a roster that doesn't really meet their usual standards?
Yeah, usually cap space in the NHL and the hard cap world is a weapon. It's a real strong asset. But this year it's a little diluted because of the rising cap and because of how many teams have so much cap space. Although most of the contenders don't have as much cap space as Carolina. So for them to be able to weaponize it, I think they're the one team, maybe a little bit of an outlier. When you look at a lot of the teams that have cap space, it's like the Anaheims, Columbus, San Jose, Chicago's of the world. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Carolina decides to use this $19 million in cap space in the coming days and weeks of the season. Anything else catch your eye here today, Hart? I thought the Islanders, had a pretty good day today, bringing in Jonathan Drouin, Romanov the other day. I thought New Jersey also had a pretty good day, re-signing Jake Allen to a low AAV deal, also bringing in some bottom six scoring in Connor Brown and Evgeny Dadonov. Even LA, for example, I thought they brought in some veteran defense with Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin, and then Corey Perry, the ageless wonder, got on there. And then I thought the most maligned deal today, in my opinion, was the Tanner Jeannot deal, the 5 years, $3.4 million to the Boston Bruins. And then they also traded for Victor Arvidsson when it seemed like last year they were kind of going the tanking route and kind of trying to rebuild and maybe replenish the prospect pool, get a little younger. And to me, they kind of did the opposite of that today. What caught your eye today?
Well, I think you were touching on the floor. I mean, one team that I thought would be way more active is San Jose. They're at 61 million. So they still have another 10 million to spend just to get to the floor. They don't really have many players to spend that on. I thought they would be a little bit more active. And I thought Anaheim, I mean, we talked about, they signed Garland. I thought they would do a little bit more. Again, there's still some players out there. And so, maybe players are hoping to get paid and go to a good team, and they might have to settle to just get paid and go to a bad team, right? They might only get one of the two things on their list. So that definitely caught my eye. You mentioned LA. Those are some pretty big numbers for the players, especially defensemen that don't move that well and don't have great underlying numbers. Like I remember when Dumoulin got traded at the deadline, I think he went for a second, and people were shocked that he went for a second.
But he played well after, though. I will say he played very well.
Now he's signing 3x4, right? Cody Ceci again, struggled in Edmonton in the playoffs. He was okay in Dallas, but wasn't great, especially down the stretch again. And now he got a raise. He was at 3.25. Now he's on a $4.5 million deal. That's pretty hefty. And then Corey Perry, I get it. He scored 10 goals in the playoffs, 19 in the regular season. He doesn't move very well. I don't think as a team, LA skates that well to begin with. And he's a guy that really helps you in a deep playoff run. I don't know if Edmonton's going to move divisions, but it's just hard to see how LA is going to go in a deep playoff run after what we've seen the last few years. So they had money to spend. It seems like they were really wanted both Marner and Gavrikov, and the person has to love you back. So I guess that's, you can't force it, but they just seemed like they had a lot of money burning a hole in their pocket, and they went and spent it, and they did get players. And I think Anton Forsberg, in fairness, of all the goalies out there, he signed he didn't sign the most expensive deal. He's probably got the best chance of living up to his contract, 2.25. He's shown he can be an over 900 save percentage goalie. Jake Allen, maybe over the next year or two will be good, but you worry about years 3, 4, and 5. So that contract I think was decent, but the other ones, spending a lot of money. Now they're down to $6 million of cap space. The roster is pretty full, so they could send some of their two-way guys down to make a little bit more space. But how are they going to get better? Like, is there someone that's going to really move the needle that's left to go and spend that $6 million on, or is there someone in the trade market? So I'm interested to see with LA what they're going to do next.
Yeah, I think the trade markets will be interesting to monitor over the next month as the offseason kind of hits full swing. The big crop of free agents are off the board. If we're looking at the player dashboard on PuckPedia.com, some of the big free agents still available. We got Nikolai Ehlers, although all signs point to him signing with Carolina. Pius Suter is probably a guy who's going to have a pretty hefty market, just like a solid third-line center, can play a full 200-foot game. He did really well on Vancouver when not a lot of players on Vancouver did well last season. So I think he's positioned himself nicely in this market. Jack Roslovic, Brent Burns, Dmitry Orlov, a couple of former Canes. Like you mentioned, the Hurricanes are pretty good at just moving those guys out and bringing other guys in of value. Jeff Skinner, Andrew Mangiapane, Matt Grzelcyk round out like the top 10 of UFAs still available. I think there's some teams that are trying to set some cap space. So we'll see what happens in the next few days. Any final thoughts here, Hart, before we wrap things up?
Yeah, well, I think just going through that free agent list, like it tells a story. Like on D, if you want someone with a bit of offense on D, Matt Grzelcyk's really the only guy. That there's not another D that has really any offense in there. If you want someone that you can say is a top 4 D, it's only Orlov, right? So I think, probably a savvy move by his agent for waiting out the market a little bit and seeing what comes. Because teams that have struck out and need someone that they could say is a legit top 4, or maybe even if they squint a top pairing guy, that's Orlov. There's only one of one. So that's interesting on the D market. The goalie market, there's basically nobody left. There's nobody that you would want. You could take a flyer on a Samsonov, for example, but there's nobody that if you're a good team, you feel really comfortable with. You're onto like your plan D or E on the goalie market. And then on forwards, the top end now is just Ehlers, like you mentioned. Then there's a couple guys that last year took a while to sign deals, Roslovic and Olofsson, and I actually had pretty decent seasons. I would think that after that experience last year where they had to wait several days, like they'll probably try and grab a chair quickly here, just to make sure they get a spot and maybe a little bit of term. And then I'd look at a guy like Andrew Mangiapane. Maybe he's like that one guy that he didn't sign right away. Maybe his number's down a little bit. He's not gonna be a first line player for you, but maybe at the price point of what's left, maybe that's a decent return on your investment if you sign in Mangiapane to play in your middle 6.
Yeah, we'll see what happens over the next few days as these deals get signed. But that's all the time we have for you on the PuckPedia Hockey Show. As a reminder, all this information, all the salary cap transactions, up to the second updates are on PuckPedia.com. If you're not following along on X at PuckPedia as well, all these deals get tweeted out immediately as soon as Hart gets all the contract details. We're also on Instagram, and subscribe to the YouTube page if you want to follow along the weekly PuckPedia Hockey Show. This is our free agency special. We will have shows weekly on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Thank you and have a good night.
PuckPedia.